for coming. We're going to start with point 3 this is in session 2. Point 3 is understanding the challenges of an aging population and how we can help family and church family respond to the age-related changes that may occur. 5 years ago, my parents moved in with us, and my dad passed in under 6 months. 2 weeks before he passed, one night, he patted my hand, and that was not my dad. He said, "Thank you for everything that you've done." Well, right after that, I told Janet, "I think he's going to pass. I think it looks like he's ready to go." Well, he was ready the next morning for breakfast, but 2 weeks later. But when he said that, he said that, "I want you to promise that you're going to take care of your mother." Well, we had not talked about all the details. I mean, there's a lot of details in there that get left out. So he'd asked me that, and I said that I would. My mother had been diagnosed in 2005 with vascular dementia, and he hid that from us until 2020 when they moved in with us. And if we had known sooner, we would have moved them down here so that we could have helped them establish some patterns. As someone goes through decline, you have to start some things early, because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to introduce those behaviors later on that are helpful. So that's just hindsight. You know, if they had moved down earlier, we might have been able to catch his pancreatic cancer 5 years earlier. But and also the Irish are traditionally very private regarding personal matters, and they didn't want to really discuss any of this with us, so they just kept it all very private. And that's our family on his 89th birthday in August, and he passed in December. One thing we've learned through all of this: an advance directive or living will is a legal document that outlines your preferences for medical treatment in case you become unable to communicate your wishes due to illness or incapacity. I mean, this was all new to us. It specifies what types of life-sustaining treatments you want or you don't want, guiding healthcare providers and family members in making decisions on your behalf. It's important to address these issues before you get there. It's also difficult to discuss with a parent who has a terminal disease whether he wants to sign a DNR, a do not resuscitate form. Now, my dad did tell us he didn't want chemotherapy and he didn't want radiation, because he was a visitation pastor in Pensacola, and he said he visited too many people on those treatment plans that were very, very sick, and he did not want to go through that. So he chose not to go through that. So struggling with stage 4 pancreatic cancer was a challenge. And he had not made any funeral arrangements, any financial arrangements, anything that we could pick up on and move forward. So I recommend taking time to meet with your children, a relative, or a trusted friend to prepare your finances and advance directives for this time in your life. We all know that we will pass from this earth into eternity. Those of us who are saved will be absent from this earthly tabernacle and go into the presence of the Lord. Just as we prepare for eternity by repenting and trusting in the Lord, that we'll be spending eternity with the Lord and all those who've also put their faith in Jesus, it's also important to be a good steward of those things that God has blessed you with, to be able to handle those things properly as you reach those times. Now, I'm just telling you this because we're going through all these things and just learning through it. So Janet and I have pre-purchased funeral arrangements, including caskets, burial plots, grave marker, chapel time, and other aspects. And we found that doing this preparation in advance also costs less. It costs us about 40% less than it would have if we were right at the time. If you're taking a flight and you schedule the day before, it's going to cost you a lot less than if you schedule it 3 months in advance. So that's kind of the thinking. And it will also be cheaper today than it will be in 5, 10, 15 years when you actually need it. I also prepared a service program. If my children decide to do that, you never know what's going to happen there. I selected hymns and Bible passages And I wrote out one for me when I wrote out my dad's, so I had to use that. I was a little late on that slide. Okay. In our last session, Dr. Agronin was addressing a chart titled, "Why Does Memory Fail Us?" He was discussing sleep issues. And I never realized until working with this is understanding sleep issues are very important. And he said that because we get older, we don't necessarily sleep less, but we do need to make sure we have quality sleep. Is there a reason for not sleeping well? Is there something interrupting your sleep like restless leg syndrome or obstructed sleep apnea? Not getting enough oxygen to your brain at night is significant. It's not just a matter of taking a pill. Sleep deprivation can affect memory loss, can affect brain health. Losing sleep can also help you gain weight. It's important to get an evaluation to determine if you are having interrupted sleep and if it can be corrected. Now, there's some simple things that, not from a doctor, but just from looking online, that spend time in natural light or sunlight during the day. You've got a circadian rhythm that wants to keep that rhythm. Wake up in the morning, go to sleep at night. Reduce blue light exposure in the evening. Television, computer, iPad, or smartphones especially. Do not read your smartphone or iPad in bed. That blue light does affect you. Do not consume caffeine late in the day. Try to reduce long daytime naps. That's hard to do. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I take a nap. If I'm sitting on my computer, I fall asleep while I'm working on my computer. So that's a hard one. And then try to go to bed and wake at consistent times. And get a comfortable bed. Now what was interesting, I found, is that a 2009 Oklahoma State study found that switching to a new mattress from one that was 5+ years old immediately improved sleep quality and reduced minor back discomfort. It got better as time went on. They also found that sleep quality continued to improve in the 4 weeks following the switch to a new mattress. It's recommended to replace your mattress if it's older than 7 years. Sleep quality is important. It can affect your brain health. You probably can't read all of these, but don't eat late in the evening, and that's tough for me. I'm a night snacker. High-carb foods have been found to have a negative impact on quality sleep. Don't drink a lot of liquids before going to bed, for obvious reasons. Relax and clear your mind before going to bed. Praying just before you go to sleep and clearing your mind of any issues that may stay in your mind throughout the day. And I found something that works for me. If I've got something to do the next day, and all of a sudden something comes to my mind that, I really need to keep this in mind for tomorrow because I really need this idea. So I write it on a piece of paper and just set it on the nightstand, and that way I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about it, that I'm going to forget it by morning. It's going to be there for me. So finally, rule out any sleep disorders and do not exercise before going to bed because you get everything going and rolling, and it's going to be hard for you to go to bed. Now we'll finish the final segment of Dr. Agronin's presentation. It's 17 minutes. Then Janet will follow with some clinical components and discuss a Q&A if we have some time. So now we'll go with the video.
These two can make a difference. So you can see all of these factors are common, they're frequent, they impair memory, they can impair mood, but they are 100% reversible. And medications too can make a difference. So you can see all of these factors are common, they're frequent, they impair memory, they can impair mood, but they are 100% reversible. So for me, the first part of any workup for memory is focusing on all these different aspects and really get to know the person and what's going on in their life and what their habits, medications are taking to really get a sense for what's going on with them. And so it is normal as you get older for memory processing to slow down a little bit. It's normal to have more tip-of-the-tongue experiences. We know that medications, stress can worsen memory. And we know that in general, normal memory changes can be a nuisance, but for the most part, they don't impair your functioning. Or someone is not aware of them. You know, when someone comes in and says, I forgot this, I forgot that, I can't believe I forgot to do this and that, I'm less worried when they tell me all the things they forgot, because guess what? Remembered it later. The person I'm more concerned about is they're not coming and complaining. It's a spouse or an adult child saying, I'm worried because they're having these memory lapses and the person is oblivious to it. That's more concerning because they're insight into it. They're not remembering what they're forgetting. That's more of a concern, and when it's really impairing their functioning. It's not just that they can't remember the address, but they get lost and they can't get themselves out of where they were getting lost. Or they're not the same person. They used to be planning meals all the time, and now they're not. And it's not because they're depressed, it's because they can't remember exactly how to plan the meal and how to do it. So when these changes are more frequent, more insidious, and causing more functional changes, that's when we begin to worry, and that warrants investigation. And that's what we do at our memory center. Come in, and a lot of people walk out feeling great because I say, guess what? Change this medication, or get more sleep, or get this evaluation. It's not Alzheimer's disease. That's part of what we do in the memory center. I want to give people good news. I don't want to have them participate in the study. I'd rather that they don't have Alzheimer's disease. But if that's the case, we can do a really comprehensive evaluation, and we can get them state-of-the-art treatment, which I'll talk about. So we also have to think about this fact. Aging is not just about decline, but it can also be about improvements. Who was able to perform better on this memory test? The college students or the seniors? Seniors? This is round one. Yeah, the college students did great. And why is that? Yeah, it's young brains, but they're used to, at least hopefully they're used to memorize. That's what do they do all day? What should they be doing all day? However, round two is they gave some training to the older group. They had them practice a few times, had them focus. And so who won round two? Yes. Memory you can improve, you can teach, you can train, you can make a big difference in memory. And older individuals have several benefits that younger brains don't. What are some of those advantages? Because there's a lot of things that aren't, and I'm going to show you a few of those. We'll look at both sides of the curve in a minute. It's really important to keep that in mind because people walk in and they despair of some of the changes, but not all the changes are bad. Some are really good, and we can do things to mitigate, to help buffer some of those changes. And it's interesting thinking about this experiment because you know the fable of the tortoise and the hare. You've heard that before. And what's the moral to that? It's, you know, I don't know, steady and slow wins the race. Okay. The real title, the original title of this is The Old Tortoise and the Young Hare. It really is, in origin, a parable about aging. And we know that this is true with lots of different things. So studies like this illustrate that. But another interesting study, they gave young and older people these paragraphs to read. And between each line of the paragraph was kind of gobbledygook letters that were distracting. And what they found is that the younger people flew through the paragraphs, answered all the questions afterwards, and they won the virtue of speed. The older individuals took longer, but when they looked at the results, who had better comprehension of the paragraphs? Older group, because they took their time and they focused more and they had a greater knowledge base to understand what was in these paragraphs. So again, we have to stop thinking of aging only as this period of decline. Now, even that being said, if you look across most studies of aging brains, what you will see, if you measure things like memory processing speed, visual spatial skills, mathematical abilities, and this is taken from longitudinal studies looking at different groups of people from roughly age 30 to 80. And what they see is that between the age of 50 and 60, we tend to peak in terms of most of our cognitive skills, and that things do decline as we get older. So there's no question about that. You know, we know that to be the case. An 85-year-old brain is going to be slower in lots of activities compared to a younger brain. That's a given. However, that's only if you look at these different activities, because as I'll talk about in just a minute, there are many other ways of measuring brain activity that don't show this same decline. So that's why it's important we study these individuals and really get a sense for what's going on with them. So understand that dementia, what we now are using the term neurocognitive disorder, it's a brain disease and it involves impairment across one or more areas: attention, executive ability, planning, sequencing, organizing, learning and memory, language, motor skills, social skills. These are all parts of our cognition. So even though I'm talking today a lot about memory, keep in mind it's more than just memory. We have lots of other skills that go into cognition, and when someone has a dementia or a neurocognitive disorder, you can see impairment across this entire spectrum. Of 100 people who have a form of dementia, the most common type, so 70%, Alzheimer's disease. So I know this question comes up a lot. What's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? Think about it this way. If you go to your doctor and the doctor says you have an infection, the logical question is, well, what type of infection do I have? Is it sinus, urinary tract? Similarly with dementia, if someone is suffering from it, the question is, what type do you have? And the most common type today is Alzheimer's disease. Now, let's spend a few minutes talking about what can we do about it. So is there a magical formula? Well, lots of brain tonics on the market that people are buying of all certain things. The key thing is that they don't work. There's no evidence they work. It's about someone making a lot of money and getting someone all hyped up on these formulas. It's too good to be true. Guess what? It's too good to be true. I've not yet done Dr. Cronin's memory tonic. If I did, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on a yacht out in the Caribbean counting all the money from people buying this tonic. So lots of things. There's a multi-billion-dollar anti-aging industry, people buying all sorts of things, and you might recognize some of these products in your own cabinets at home. And I hate to tell you this, but there's no evidence any of them work. It just says brain on it. Ginkgo, Get Smart formula, whatever's in the stuff, no evidence it does anything. I'm sorry to break that news to you. I don't like when people spend a lot of money on products that there's no evidence that they work, because frankly, most of the people I know as they get older, you made a good point before about how financial assets are so important in life. Who has money to spend on all this to get some other person rich that's not helping you in any way? There are the old standbys, and it's true that nicotine and caffeine are brain stimulants. If you put rats running through a maze and you get them hopped up on nicotine, they do better. There's no question about that. Now, I'm not suggesting smoking as a way to help your brain. We've actually done studies looking at nicotine. So what factors can make a difference? So let's take 5-10 more minutes. I want to talk about some practical aspects, and then we'll be done for today. Does physical exercise help? The answer is yes. Do you have to run a marathon, go to the gym every day? No. So this study showed exactly what you need to do. 3 times a week, they walked from building up from 10 to 40-minute sessions. They did a little stretching. That's probably the baseline. If you're doing something like walking or something you enjoy, gardening, whatever, that you're being physically active for 30 to 40 minutes 3 times a week, you're getting enough exercise to help your brain. And if you actually look at brains on exercise, what you see is that the cells make more connections. They sprout little connections to one another, and those connections, that's how you learn, that's how you form memories. Your brain releases certain chemicals that cause these cells to make more connections. So exercise is the best thing you can do, number 1, 2, 3, and 4 on your list. What about diet? There's no magical diet, but we do know that a diet with lots of fruits and vegetables seems to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease, and it's going to be the best way to go. Most people don't need all the vitamins and supplements they take, but you can get all that through lots of fruits and vegetables. And my friend Gary Small has written about this a lot, and he says not eating too many calories, getting lots of antioxidants that you get in fruits and fatty acids. You can get it in fish, you can get it in lots of different nuts, may have a role with a healthy brain. Low glycemic index carbs. What that means is not your processed carbs that turn to sugar immediately, but ones that take longer to digest. And so basically, if you say, well, what foods have most antioxidant properties? Anything that is really deep in color. So, deep blues, deep greens, eating a plate and not with food from food coloring, that makes a difference. So prunes, blueberries, spinach, broccoli, these are great things, healthy for your brain. And if you want to know, well, what about in terms of carbs and this glycemic index thing? Obviously, very high glycemic index, not surprisingly, jelly beans, pretzels, French fries. Obviously, I think we know intuitively it's not the best diet. Minimal to low, fruits, yogurt, bananas, things like that. People think you need to spend all this money and go on these fancy diets to make a difference. You really don't. Working your brain out can make a difference. Now, people think, I got to do these brain games. I have to go on, online to do it. I need to do all these crossword puzzles that I hate. No. Working out your brain is listening to a lecture, listening to music that you love, going to lectures, doing adult education, doing different things, learning a language. Now you'll be fluent at it, but just because you're improving your brain. Just like when you go to the gym, you work out all different parts, you have to work out different parts of your brain. So doing a crossword puzzle maybe work out certain parts of your brain, but do things that you enjoy. You're not going to keep doing it. So that's really the key thing in terms of making a difference. Brain games, if you enjoy it, great, but there's nothing secret about them or better than so many other things that you can do. Reading, lectures, listen to different points of view. That's the one thing that was so important about college, that you were exposed to many different points of view. It forces you to think and exercise different parts of your brain. So I'm going to give you some important memory tips before we end. Make sure you get enough sleep, and if you're not, go to a sleep specialist. Get a study done. Find out what's going wrong, and don't just reach for an over-the-counter. We talked about diet, we talked about exercise, we talked about mental stimulation. Social stimulation, being active socially, which can be volunteer work, is one of the best things you can do. Giving back to other people, it gives you a sense of, that someone mentioned before, gives you a sense of meaning. I went to an amazing lecture a few months ago. It was all about having a sense of purpose. People lived longer, they had fewer heart attacks, their well-being was better. All when you have a mission, you have a sense. That's one of the most powerful things that you can do. And this is hard science. It's not just these squishy people saying this. Attitude can make a difference too. People who have a more positive attitude about aging tend to live longer. They tend to do better. And see a doctor. Obviously, don't ignore things. No harm in using memory tools, whether it's notepads, calendars, having certain places you put everything. We all need these memory aids, and they can make a difference. Not just if you have memory difficulties, they can work even more. But, don't be afraid to use things like that. And I never like to, when people say, well, it's all that technology I can't deal with. Makes no difference. I love when people come into our clinic and they're in their 80s and 90s and they're using their iPads and they're going on the internet and they're using their phones. But there's no reason why you can't learn to do these things. Really open up an amazing world and things you can look at and research that you never thought possible. Gary Small says you combine all these things together, you can push off the onset of Alzheimer's disease by up to 4 years if you're destined to get it. 4 years is a long time. It's the difference between 84 that you might show symptoms of that. That's a huge difference. So more evidence showing that these simple things make a difference. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on this jellyfish extract that people are trying to sell. Go to the supermarket and buy some blueberries and spend time with your friends and do something you enjoy, plant a flower. Things like that literally make a difference. So let's wrap up with a key question. Do some skills get better as we get older? I mentioned this earlier. So let me ask you this. When do you think you made better decisions? When you were 18 or today? Anyone when you were 18? I just gave this lecture to a group of 18-year-olds, so it kind of wrecked my argument. Why is that? What do you have now that you didn't have when you were 18? When you're 18, your body, your brain are pumping and about as healthy as they're going to get. Experience, wisdom, knowledge, all that. So it's obvious. But so think about this. When you turn 65, do you get a letter in the mail saying, all learning and wisdom stop? Come at 85? It never comes, because you always learn and grow and make changes. So these are aspects of ourselves that increase as we get older. Resilience, wisdom, creativity, emotional maturity, tolerance, purpose, integrity, hope. So think about that. This is what gives us meaning. This is what gives us purpose. This is ultimately what makes a difference in one's life. All these things grow and they get better as we get older.
So many of you tonight here with us already realize, and you've been praying with us, that we were required by Trinity Place to move my mother-in-law, from the assisted living, its own building, to a brand new building they built next door that was memory care. And this is a photo of Mom just on a typical day of visiting her at the assisted living facility. And as we considered tonight, the Lord just really put on my heart to share this journey of grace, because some of you in this room may be having the same difficulty of a person who is most dear to your heart, that you're going to face these same struggles. So Jim has reminded me many times, and more so recently, that no trial comes into my life, our lives, or my mother-in-law's life that doesn't go through God's divine filter. And as Jim and I prayed when this situation came up, we began visiting facilities and really praying through, where is there an assisted living facility? It was just very difficult when I toured the memory care Trinity Place and see all of those people that have much less, more cognitive decline. Very difficult. And so I just was really struggling with the whole thing. And so there is a faith-based assisted living facility that's right across from Idlewild Baptist Church. I understand it used to be owned by Idlewild, and it's called Angel Senior Living. And many retired pastors and missionaries live there, and they have wonderful music playing, much more soothing than what was at even the Trinity Place assisted living. Many of the residents played the hymns on the piano like my mother-in-law would enjoy. And retired pastors, they'd have a separate room where they would do Bible studies. And so I really believe that this was an answer to prayer and absolutely a divine appointment, that when these two ladies, the administrator and her daughter, who was the director, came to Trinity Place to evaluate Mom, it was amazing the fellowship we had in the Lord, that the administrator had graduated from Tennessee Temple, spent her entire adult career teaching in a Christian school, and I just knew that God had us to make this move. And so as we grow our advocacy team, I'm confident that some of these experiences that Jim and I have gone through, and that you have, that could be up here tonight sharing with us, we'll be able to use this at our own, with our own church family and our widows in our church family. So I want to mention another divine appointment, just real briefly, that the lady that's in this photo, her name is Darlene. Wonderful born-again Christian, 83 years old, has most of her cognitive abilities. Went on a missionary trip to Peru when she was like 81, just very active, drives herself at least 3 times a week to her church, Baptist church there in Newport Richey. And she has ministered to Mom over these last 4 years. Now, as Jim mentioned, when she and Dad were living with us, and after about a year and a half or so, we could no longer take care of her because it just wasn't safe. You know, leaving the teapot on without any hot water, getting up in the middle of the night, doing things I can't even, would not be good to say some of the details. Jim would not want me to. But so the day that we had, after we looked at many places, and we said, okay, let's call, we'll make an appointment. And that Thursday, when we went to Trinity Place, almost 4.5 years ago now, we walked in, Jim was talking to the administrator, and Mom and I were standing out, and they were having some kind of group gathering. We'll come to find out it was a pastor from that Baptist church in Darlene. I thought she was a member of that church, coming out to minister to these people, and here she was a resident. And they actually asked my mom to play Amazing Grace on the piano, and it was just, we just knew that that was a divine appointment. And so, just like Darlene was there 4.5 years ago, and then as I relayed this current situation, but it has not been an easy transition. And I probably am having a harder time with it than even that she's aware of, because she isn't as aware of her situation. And so when I think about this, I think of the phrase, you might have seen it in fact, it's on the Alzheimer's website. It's called the long goodbye. And I share this journey briefly because you could use this information to recognize these stages as you care for the ones that you love. So with mild dementia, the testing, the imaging that we talked about last week, it will be abnormal, but the person will be functioning at a much higher level, and it might just be very insidious, small things that you notice that you think, oh, they're not quite sharp. And for Mom, she would forget the conversation. Dad would start days ahead of time, start packing, you're going to Tampa, Jeremy's graduating, or whatever the situation was. And she would then accuse him that he never told her that they were going, or that she liked to have cash in her wallet, and he would give her cash, and then she'd say the next day, I don't have any money. And so he thought he thought she was throwing it away. So the garbage man maybe got some profit out of that one. So, but as the disease progresses to moderate dementia, it's more of a serious decline in some of those functions that Dr. Agronin talked about. So for her, she would get lost when she drove to places that she drove to many, many times. They lived in Pensacola for over 20 years. And so she voluntarily stopped driving and didn't want to drive anymore, and had a driver's license. She'll still tell you today she can drive and have her driver's license, but she actually stopped driving completely. And so the next stage in this long goodbye is this severe dementia. And really, I think Mom is kind of at the border of this, especially with the move. It was very difficult for her, and it's almost like a hollow replica of the person that you loved and knew, that you did all of those memories with. And so we ask for your prayer for God's grace for us as well, because in my nursing brain, I know that it's the best thing for her to be in a safe environment. I was so excited. I spent about 3 days from morning till evening with her at the Angels, met so many lovely ladies that loved the Lord and played the piano, and one lady showed her how to play the organ that they had in this special Bible study room. And then we're sitting in this Bible study, and this resident who is a pastor in his past was teaching on John 6, and she started just turning to me and saying, we got to get out of this place. What is this? And I just couldn't even believe that that was Mom, because that isn't her at all. She loves the Lord so dearly. So as we go through these trials, there have been many of you in this room that have helped us in the journey. And I've read 2 Corinthians chapter 1 many times. Pastor and Sheila have been such an encouragement to us, our Christian friends. And I think about Jan and Rick. If you guys remember, you got all these ice cream and toppings, and we all gathered at Trinity Place. Her dad was there, and Mom, and all of us. And it was such an encouragement to us. And then Vicki one time came and played the piano that we ministered to those residents. We talked about how Ruth comes so many times a week and prays with her, and Sandy Frame with finishing an Afghan that Mom never finished, and gave that to her for her 94th birthday. And it's so interesting because it comes and goes during this last stage. And so I'll be quoting John 14 to give her comfort at night as I get her ready to go to bed because it's hard for her at night. And she will correct me on a word in the King James Version. I am not. So it's amazing how the brain is just such a fascinating organ. So we talked last week, and you took the tool home on measuring cognitive decline. Did any of you look over that? Raise your hand. Okay, great. And Vicki and Randy, they actually remember the 3 unrelated words. So what I have for them, they each have their personal copy. They can take it on their trip. It's word searching, sharpen your memory, boost your vocabulary. So here you go. All right, maybe it'll fit in your suitcase. So when we think about some of the things Dr. Agronin had mentioned about those lifestyle things, I just want to mention a few of these handouts. So these 10 warning signs, it's just like a quick reference. But along with that, on the Alzheimer's website, they actually have the 10 warnings that are the same, but more an explanation of it. And on this, you can see the website at the bottom. The thing I like about this handout is for each of those 10 things, it says what it would look like if they have dementia, but what it would be if it's just getting an aging process, normal aging that we looked at in the video. So for all 10, it has both aspects. So I think that's a helpful tool as you're working with your loved ones. Is it just age-related, or is it really something more serious that needs to be looked into with dementia? The other handout is really all of the tips that Jim and Dr. Agronin already mentioned. I put it in a handout. And then if you're really motivated, remember our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we should treat our physical health what God has blessed us with. Some of us, our DNA isn't that great, but that what we have, we should really take it seriously. And so the list is there, but then I actually have a checklist where you can check these things that you're doing. And then on the final page, I actually put together a schedule that you might want to try to do, so we can see if that might be a help. So how many of you say that you do 150 minutes a week of some kind of moderate aerobic activity? Raise your hand. Great, super. And then really, if you did 10,000 steps a day with some kind of tracking system, that is just as good. So some people asked me last week about drinking water. So if I weighed 120 pounds, which I wish I could, half of my body weight would be 60. So I should drink 60 ounces of water every day, half of your body weight in ounces. How many are really faithful in their water drinking? Raise your hand. Great, wonderful. And then learning new skills. Some of you know that I went back and got another MSN as a family nurse practitioner, and that's really sharpened my brain. And then the Mediterranean diet, those kind of things that will reduce the lipids in your diet. Even if you have the genetics of having high lipids, there are some things that we can do with the way we eat. So as you know, that these type of activities can give us longer brain health. No one thing, depending on our genetics, is the solution. But our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we should treat them. And I know that I've had conversations with many of you regarding that. So in closing, I just want to say that God has really been teaching me so many things through this journey. And I know that at this point, I've probably get a D- if it was going to be graded, because it's very difficult to see someone you love so much fade, and when there's nothing you can do to fix it or to help them. So I just pray that when we come before our Savior, like we talked about in Revelation, Randy, that the Lord will say to Jim and I, we're going to be judged individually, but we'll give an account, and that he'll say, good and faithful servant, So we're just praying for God's wisdom, because if I could take care of her in our home, I would absolutely do it. But it would not be safe with her condition.